Hey Tubies, it's Psychic Bob. Well, here we are, it's Friday. That means it's time for UFO Friday. Welcome, welcome. I'm so glad you're here. You know, I was sitting here and I've been looking at one of my Lemurian crystals. This is an Andara crystal. The Andara crystals are like kind of a type of volcanic glass that was believed to be part of ancient Lemuria. And they actually made temples out of this. You guys may remember I have a giant emerald, Lemurian emerald. I won't bring it out today, it's too big, but I'm sitting there looking at this and I was thinking about the Lemurians. And I have a number of Lemurian crystals. In fact, I'll show you some of my other ones here. I love these because whenever I look at the Lemurian crystals, it opens a psychic gateway. It draws me back to ancient Lemuria. This is a beautiful one. Look at this one, capped in gold. And it's like very translucent, almost clear, this one. It's like ice. And, you know, when I look at these crystals, as I said, it opens kind of a psychic doorway for me. It takes me back to Lemuria. Now, you know, as I've told many of you, I have received confirmation from Lemurian guides as well as Ascended Masters and Pleiadians that the early life on Earth was connected to the people from out there, from the stars. And so whenever we want to connect to that energy, you know, we can tap into crystals. Now, you know, some of you are going to say, well, what's that got to do with UFO Friday? Well, you know, it's believed that these crystals were planted. They're called Lemurian seed crystals. They were planted by the people of Lemuria. And I was told that the Lemurians actually, when they first came to Earth, some of them were just pure spirit. And then they evolved into human consciousness or took on a more physical form. And these crystals were planted by the early Lemurians so that humanity would always have access to that wisdom, that ancient knowledge, that power. And I can tell you, as somebody you know, who's worked with Lemurian crystals, whenever I meditate with them, they do give me a connection to the astral realms and to the Akashic records. The Akashic records are the, you know, kind of psychic recorded history, the data banks of all that occurred on the earth. And so if you've been wanting to understand more about the beginning of life on Earth, I would encourage you to research Lemurian crystals and get them. Now, you know what's really interesting is I found recently a connection to the space people in Lemuria in this book. This is one of my old favorite books. It's called The Voice of Venus. And this is a channeled work by Ernest Norman. He was a channel who founded a group called the what's it called? Here, I'll tell you. Unarius Academy of Science. And they were a group, a spiritual group devoted to exploring UFOs and human evolution and consciousness. Really powerful group. I don't know if they're still around. They're out of California. But I may have a picture here of them. Ruth and Ernest Norman. Here they are. They headed up this group. They were channels. They were mediums. And they would often receive messages from various alien beings. They were channels. And this book is a channeled work where Ernest received telepathic communications about the planet Venus and its relationship to life on Earth as well. And there's an amazing chapter. I wanted to read some of this to you today. It's called The Science of Space Travel. It's chapter 4 in this book. And I would recommend you try to get this book. It's an amazing book. But what's fascinating is they touch in on the connection of Mars and Lemuria, also in relation to Earth and Venus. And I wanted to read this to you because I think it's going to give us a lot of insight. You know, so many of you have been writing and asking me to talk more about UFOs, how they travel, how they work, you know, how is it possible? And this is a really good chapter that touches in on so much of that. So I want to read some of this to you. Now, this was channeled, as I said, through Ernest, and the Ascended Master, he was from Venus. His name was Malvar, and he was a Venusian avatar, a very high-ranking being, like an Ascended Master from Venus. And he says, I'm just going to read it to you here. Greetings again, my friends, and all my brothers and sisters on the earth plane. May I say first that I'm very happy to be with you again, and thank you for the gracious way in which you have received my brother during my enforced absence. I have decided to resume insomuch as you have begun to understand the factors of energy and mass. Understand that the factors of energy and mass are but relative, and that they depend primarily for expression upon the source or fountainhead, and that these equations of energy and mass are but the outward intelligence expressed from the fountainhead. And when they talk about the fountainhead, I believe they're talking about the Godhead, the divine source. I'm going to skip down through because there's so much here and it just goes on and on and on. It says, I will discuss the topic of today, which, although it does not necessarily pertain to the expression of life on Venus, is pertinent and vital for your understanding and peace of mind. In the future generations of mankind upon the Earth plane. Our topic today will deal with the spacecraft and the historical background of the Earth with regard to interplanetary travel. When your scientists touched off the first atom bomb, it had an immediate and far-reaching effect into many of the astral worlds and in some of the dimensions which are more closely related to the Earth. About 5 planets, including Venus, were immediately startled and gravely concerned with what might be the misuse of atomic power. Clarion, another planet not generally known to the Earth people, was another one so concerned. Likewise, Mars. Eros was also alerted, and it was swung into an orbit which would bring it close to conjunction with the Earth. And it says, it's got a footnote. Eros is a planet not yet known by Earth astronomers. And isn't that interesting? Like a lot of people have talked about Nibiru as an unknown planet. Well, they call it in this book Eros, so maybe they're talking about Nibiru. I'm not sure. That's a whole nother video, but they're saying that basically a lot of these planets got concerned when they saw atomic use of weapons on the Earth. Or use of atomic weapons, I should say. These planets all sent out spacecraft or used other means to explore the Earth to find out all possible ramifications which might be involved in these atomic explosions. Now, I just want to pause just for a second there because remember I told you in a previous video I said, interestingly, from like 1947 forward, the sightings of UFOs and saucers increased all over the Earth exponentially. And you remember in 1951 or 52, there was a big flyover openly in Washington, D.C., and that made the front page of the Washington Post and the Evening Star back then. So, you know, this is a lot of people have forgotten our recent history that there have been increased sightings. And this is why, because it was immediately after following World War II. And it says, the people of the Earth during the following years were tremendously excited by the appearance and strange behavior of these various types of craft. One type in particular, which you call flying saucers, has caused the greatest consternation and conjecture, particularly to the Earth scientists. He is at a loss to explain the sudden appearance and disappearance of these craft. Also, he is flabbergasted with the tremendous speeds which they can attain and which he can only track on his radar screen. He is also bewildered by their appearance of being a white-hot heat or cooling to a dull cherry red. To interject a little mystery here, let me say that there is no heat produced in the use of these craft. But first I must digress to explain to you some of the historical background which is necessary to understand your present situation. Isn't this interesting? Okay. Now, here, listen to this. About 500,000 years ago, the people of Mars were commuting regularly to the Earth by spacecraft. They had established a colony on the southern edge of what is now called the Gobi Desert, at the foothills of the Himalayan mountains. They were, however, set upon from time to time by savage bands of native Earthmen who roamed about the Earth at that time. In the last of these forays, a large group of Martians barely escaped with their lives into the nearby hills, where they remained hidden and lost to their countrymen, who finally abandoned the idea of colonization on the Earth. They were a peace-loving people, and although they had weapons at their disposal that would have annihilated these savage Earthmen, yet they refused to use them. Now remember, you know, we've talked in previous videos about the Martians being an intelligent race. This is another confirmation of that. And they had weapons that were highly advanced, probably laser weapons and maybe even nuclear weapons. And so the Earth swung in its orbit unattended for several 100,000 years until the coming of, listen to this, till the coming of the Lemurians from the planet Lemuria, which is about 700 light years away from our solar system. You may wonder how these men traversed this vast distance without consuming the best part of their lives. It was through the principle of change of frequency relationship, which enabled the spacecraft to travel through inner space at speeds approximately 100 times that of your known light speed. Now, light speed's 186,000 miles per second, mentions that here. Therefore, the distance from Lemuria to our solar system could be traversed in a very small fraction of the time, which you might assume would normally be necessary. In other words, in about 5 or 6 years. Okay, so they're traveling 100 times the speed of light. And this is interesting because they talk about traveling through inner space. I suspect that they're referring to perhaps a wormhole or a dimensional portal of some sort. I don't know if they explain it here. We'll have to look. But it's very interesting, you see. During this journey, the ship was flown and controlled by a robot calculator. The 11 who occupied the ship remained in a state of suspended animation, something like a cataleptic, hypnotic trance. Okay. It was about 160,000 years ago in your Earth time that the great spacecraft crashed in the Gobi Desert, very close to where the Martians formerly lived. So it was the spacecraft from Lemuria that crashed 160,000 years ago. Inside this craft were 11 men who had come, as you had been told, from a planet much closer to the central vortex of the material universe than our own solar system. This was the planet Lemuria, about 3 times the size of Earth and warmed by the rays of a huge, brilliant, copper-colored sun, to which it was fairly close. The people of this planet are, compared to Earth people, of a very large and tall stature. Now, this is true, and I know that many people have had encounters with the Lemurians, have confirmed that they are taller, significantly taller than Earth people. They are also advanced in their spiritual evolution to a point which is about one halfway between the scientific plane of Mars and the spiritual plane of Venus. We had long been in telepathic communication with these people, and it had been their first attempt with spacecraft at such vast distances, which had ended so disastrously on Earth. So the Lemurians were in connection psychically with the Venusians. So this again points to what I said previously, that they communicate telepathically. And many people today, myself included, have received telepathic communications from Lemurians and Pleiadians. Now, they don't mention Pleiades here, but I'm pretty sure that the Pleiadians are connected in here somewhere. It had not been their desire to land on Earth, but rather on Venus. But they had been deflected from their true course by the strong magnetic field of a huge sun. They passed on their journey here. So anyways, I'm going to stop there. But what's fascinating is that the channels are all bringing forth the same information. People unconnected. Interestingly, people who have been abducted or traveled aboard these ships who don't even know about these beings have been shown and given same testimony. So this is important because what we're discovering is that there are confirmations across many places by different people, unconnected, that say that life is out there and it has been interacting with the Earth for a long time. So I'm going to encourage you guys, you might want to get this book, The Voice of Venus, because it really touches in on amazing stuff here. Now, hold on a second. I'm going to give you a little more of the technical specs on the spacecraft, okay? Because there's a whole history lesson, which I'll spare. We'll do another video. But just to touch in on the whole concept of life coming forth from Lemurian and Venusian ships. And it says, okay, so they're talking about how the flying saucers work, okay? And it says, this saucer is guided by the mother ship, a cigar-shaped craft, which usually hovers motionless out in space at about 10,000 miles distance from the surface. Now, I've got to jump in here again. I've done previous videos showing these large Venusian motherships. The Venusians as well as Lemurians have motherships and flying saucers. The craft is pilotless and is flown by a beam of energy which projects like an invisible searchlight from the mothership. The beam is hollow like a tube, in the center of which the saucer always remains. The outer shell of this tube-like beam is a composite form of innumerable wave shapes or intelligences, which have been taken from a source coming from the fountainhead and through the processes which are known to them, as well as to ourselves. These energies are so directed that they can change the relationship of the atomic structures which compose the metals of the ship and thus render it weightless. Okay, now let's stop there. So what they're saying is that some of these saucers are unmanned, but they're kind of like probes. They're being controlled by a mothership, and they're sent out under a kind of a tractor beam. Now, did you get the part where it says that they're made of substances that can change their wavelengths? This touches in on the whole concept of biomorphic craft. So now it's all starting to come together. We're seeing that the intelligent beings of these other worlds have mastered sciences and have learned the interrelation between matter and energy, so much so that they can control the very appearance and weight of structures. Absolutely fascinating. So, anyways, I think we'll stop right there. That's a lot just to digest. But I want to touch in on it today, you know. I want to ask you guys, have you heard about the connections between Venus and Lemuria? Some of you have been connected to Lemurian guides, and you know, maybe they've given some of these revelations to you. I'd love to hear about it. So anyways, that's a lot to think about. But you know, if you want to tune to these ancient peoples and cultures, I might really recommend that you get a Lemurian crystal, because I can tell you when I use them for meditation, I just hold them in my hand and I draw their power into my body. You know, the energy can just absorb right into you. And it will help you understand that we are all connected to the stars. A lot to think about, isn't it? Anyways, well, listen, guys, I'm going to keep it short. Psychic Bob's got more work today. I'm so glad you're here. You guys are rocking it. Listen, if you want to get on my schedule for a private reading, make sure to connect with me. I'll put the link in the info box below to my information, my phone number, my website. Definitely check me out. And, you know, listen, keep it here at Spirit Show. We got more coming tomorrow. What's tomorrow? Saturday. Oh, we'll have Saturday night seance. You don't want to miss it. Make sure to be here. You guys are the best. I love you. Sending you my blessings. Thanks for being here. Oh, by the way, if you didn't see yesterday's video, definitely check that out. We went out shopping and had lunch on Vlog Thursday. It was a lot of fun. Thanks for all of you who came out to that video. You guys rock. And listen, if you haven't seen it, definitely check it out. Also, thank you for helping me out, and I hope you'll continue by liking this video, you know, favoriting it, share it with your friends. You guys have my permission. You can post it anywhere you want. It's unlimited. You have access to post it. And, you know, hit subscribe. Be part of our channel. We'd love you to be here. Anyways, guys, I'm glad you're here. I send you my blessings. We'll see you back here tomorrow for Saturday Night Seance. And until then, may you always blessed be.